quite a nice kit. And as you can see, there's a lot of detail involved and really nice surface detail. Hello, this is BJ from Hearns Hobbies, and the kit I'll be looking at today is an Airfix kit. This is the 1/48 scale P51D or P51K. Now actually I didn't really know much about these with the differences. The D and the K is pretty much the same aircraft. The K was made at a different factory, and there's a slight difference in that they were supplied with a different propeller. Some of the other parts, I mean, there could have been some superficial parts that look different, but I mean that's the same with even different runs of the same aircraft from the same factory. But the biggest difference between the K is the propeller. So you'll be able to see the shape difference. But even after they were being used, quite often they were changed in the field to the more common propeller used on the D. So this has got the British markings on it. The P51 Mustangs were actually designed by a British order, built in the States. And it was a fighter that was designed from the ground up. And they designed a very good aircraft. So the A and B models actually had, what would you call it, the smaller type of enclosed cockpit. And to improve on visibility, they started putting on this bubble top canopy on the Ds and the Ks. Okay, so let's have a closer look at the box art. This is the box art here, really nice. You can see the two different versions there, different box arts, and then there's also various versions here as well. So there's quite a few options included. Very nice decals as well, which we'll have a closer look at. A little bit of the history of the aircraft, actually it's this way around, over here. And then, as per Airfix, they always have a chart there with the Humbrol numbers and then the glue that's required to complete it. Okay, so let's have a look. So this is part of their newer, I guess I would call this a newer generation. Every brand has a particular generation that they've gone through and they're quite recognizable. This is their modern type stuff. So still not the latest. It's been done within the last couple of years. And you'll be able to see, I mean, that's a fairly large box and there's a lot of sprue and a lot of parts. Okay, so later generation, this is all computer designed. The instruction manual is also CAD based, and they put a lot of thought into how to construct these particular molds and how the kit's going to go together. So they've designed certain aspects where they can be changed for making different kits, slightly different versions. And this particular one, having different props, does have different props in there, and you can see there's a whole range of different wheels and tires. But let's have a closer look at all these bits. Actually, let's move this cover back over here, make a bit of room. I'll start pulling out these parts. Okay, so you can see quite a lot of parts. Let me put these aside. Alright, let's look at the clear parts first. Alright, so this is where, as I described earlier, how these newer generation kits have been thought out. So the clear parts actually have 3 different bubble canopies and 2 front windscreen modules. Okay, I call them modules because it's not just a windscreen as you'll see in a very early kit. This is a more modern design where you've actually got a front panel attached so that you don't have these massive gaps between the clear windscreen and the actual fuselage. This alleviates that by the join lines. Once they're glued in, even if you have a little bit showing, it's fine because they're meant to resemble panel lines. Okay, I can only assume that there's some slight differences between these 3 bubble canopies, and the instructions actually only show you to use these 2 for this particular K model. Other bits and pieces here, which I can't quite recognize. They look a little bit like struts for the undercarriage, but I don't understand why they would be in clear, so I'm sure they're for something else. Okay, so you can see how that's a generic type part and it includes a lot of extras. So you have all these bits you can put into your spares bin and use them for scratch building or kit bashing or whatever you like. Okay, so there's the clear parts. Alright, and then let's move on to this sprue, which was quite recognizable before. You can see how many small components there are. I mean, the Airfix kits that you still see around quite prevalently, which are still molds from the 60s and 70s, generally don't have this many parts. As you can understand, cutting a mold is very expensive, and early days their technology didn't allow for such fine detail. So they tried to do as few parts as possible with the detail already molded in. But these days we prefer the extra parts, because when you've got a injection mold like this and you've got a bottom part and a top part, the only way to get the detail is from either side. Anything that's around the edges gets a bit softened. So the more parts you have in a kit, the more detail it's going to look, but it's going to be more complicated. So your engineering has to be perfect to make sure the parts will fit. Okay, so the most recognizable parts here would be, you've got different exhaust stacks. You have a whole range of different tires, and I'm trying to see if they're weighted. They do have a weighted look to them. So you can see this section here is flattened, which is very nice because it adds that extra element of, I guess, weight, because they are heavy and they do squash the wheels. And normally you'll see them, they're perfectly round. Perfectly round is fine if you want to model a aircraft which is just taken off with the undercarriage down. But most of the time we'll be building these and setting them on their undercarriage, so they should look weighted, or you'll have them in flight mode, which means you have all the undercarriage doors closed. But this is a really nice touch. Okay, so we have different tread patterns. Okay, so we've got diamond tread, and then there's also smooth ones here as well. We've got some bombs here. We've got there's a seat. The seat's really nicely quilted. I will zoom in on that and I'll show you a bit later. You've got air intake. The cockpit is quite nicely detailed with quite three-dimensional dials. We've got the gun ports for the front leading edge of the wings. Various vents. So quite a lot of options. Got here, that's probably a tail wheel, I'm guessing. It's probably the tail dragger tail wheel. Okay, you've got the rear vents as well for the cooling for the back. Okay, and rear section. Okay, let's zoom in a bit and we'll have a close look at some of these details. Okay, so there's wheels. Hopefully you see there the treaded ones just there, and then we have some rib ones. The weighted section is quite noticeable at this point here. Nice touch. Okay, there's a quilting that you can see on the pilot seat. And there's the instrument panel. Excuse me. All right, there's the various exhaust stacks. Got some bombs. Optional vents on this side. There's the machine guns. Main undercarriage right there. So really well detailed. And this is something, if you haven't built an Airfix kit in a long time, these are quite spectacular. Okay, so let's move on to the next sprue. Alright, so you've got some wing sections here. So you can see how the engineering is quite different from an early Airfix kit. It's a more modern take on it. You have different sections here for options. Okay, so they're probably options for a different kit, not this particular one. So you use the specific ones for this version. You've got the base of the wings. You can see the cartridge exits here for the machine guns. Actually, hang on. Where am I looking here? No, that'll be the top section. It can't be the top section. Oh, this is the undercarriage here. Okay, so the undercarriage. So this is the bottom there, the cartridge exits for the machine guns. You'll notice that the surface detail is quite pronounced. Some people may not like that, but the rivets are very deep, and I think that helps a lot with bringing out that detail. I mean, when you're applying a wash, sometimes when we look at say Hasegawa or the newer Tamiya kits with a very fine detail, yes, it looks very scale, but it doesn't help you bring out those details. And sometimes you need to exaggerate details for this scale of model. Otherwise, all those sort of details will be just lost. Okay, so we've got, this is the top of the engine cowl. The different tail structures here, we'll have the rudder, which is a separate item attached. So as I show you, we'll see that a lot of the control surfaces are separate and allows you to set them up in whatever angle you prefer. We have the insides of the cockpit walls. There's the main gear undercarriage. You can see there's a lot of fine plumbing detail in there as well. It does look very clean. So let's just do a quick zoom on some of these items. Alright, so there's the some of the rivet detail, or screw detail I guess, you can see on the top of the engine cowl. You can see how they are quite pronounced with the shadows that are being brought up. Now again with the wings, okay, this is the base of the wing. Very deep rivet detail. It's very crisp though. So you may think it's, you know, when I explain that it's really deep, that it's out of scale. It looks very good though. Okay, you've got open holes here for lights, so they are molded in the clear section which I saw before with the canopies. Okay, so there's one section of the leading edge of the rudder section, and again you can see those deep details. I mean, there's a vast improvement on the early types of Airfix kits. Then as we go over here, we've got the undercarriage main gear doors, and this is where you see all that super fine. You see the 3 rib pattern in there from the pressings, and then you see all the finer sort of wire and stuff on the inside here. And here's the other rudder root. Okay, so that's the main sprue at the bottom of the wing. Okay, so from there we move on to this large part here, okay, which has got fuselage halves and the upper wing halves as well. Now this is an interesting part. This is the cockpit and rear undercarriage. I guess it's a module. So we've seen with a lot of the modern kits, they've designed structures on the inside, so it's not just hollow and just slapped together. It actually has some structural design to it. So some of these parts in the rear, they don't really need to be there. Traditionally you have the rear undercarriage box. It'll be glued into here separately. And then you have a big hollow section. With this module, this will fit into the middle and give a lot of strength. So this is going to be supporting all of the inner part of the fuselage, as well as the wings and your undercarriage. Okay, so again, we've got really nice surface detail. The control surfaces, as you can see here, are separate. So your flaps are separate and your ailerons are separate. You can see the ailerons just sitting on the side there. We've got the rudder as well. So the rudder section is separate, and you can see some really nice ribbing. So these would have been fabric covered, I think, for that ribbing to be visible. So that's really nice. And then you've got your sides of your fuselage. You've got really, again, deep panel lines and deep rivet holes. And the screw holes here, they've got really sharp details with the screws protruding as well. Here we've got various ordnance. Okay, so there'll be drop tanks. And there's the other side. Okay, so let's have a close look at some of these. All right, so there's the engine cowling side. The wing root, it's got a bit of a fillet. Panel lines, really deep. You can see the shadows from the lighting going through that. And then you can see some of this riveting. But towards the front there is actually screws. You can see the screw centers there as well, which is a really nice touch. Over here, there's a ribbing for the rudder. Okay, so that's the fabric stretching over the ribs. Nice detail on these ordnance as well. There's really great textures on this. Not too sure what these are. Okay, then when we go to the wings, which are just over here, and you see this cutout. This is for the machine guns. And then you've got the control surfaces here, which are separate. And on an early Airfix kit, all these would have been molded in one, so it would have been all totally flat. There's the aileron with the trim tab. And the other one. And this is the module that goes on the center. Okay, so this cutout at this point is for the tail wheel. Okay, and so this top part here, this is where the cockpit goes together. So the cockpit sits in here, got the avionics, and the canopy would be just across here. Okay, so let's go on to our next sprue. Okay, so this is another generic type sprue. This has got the original type standard prop on it, the 4-blader. We have this insert here, which would be for the main undercarriage. You've got your flaps. So there's 2 sets of flaps here. You can have it set as flaps up, flaps down. Actually, that'll be the ailerons. So what do I have before? Oh, that was the, they would have been the elevators that I was showing before. Okay, here we've got the horizontal stabilizers. And then you have another structural element here, which is just the front of the wing root towards the engine cowl at the bottom. And we have, that's the main gear covers, I think, in a closed position. Got a really nice pilot there as well. Okay, so let's have a closer look. Now, one complaint I quite often hear about is pilot figures aren't included in a lot of kits these days. So I do see ICM, they produce quite a few separate pilot figures now. And then also Masterbox do have them as well. But it always used to be traditional to have a pilot figure in Tamiya kits and Airfix kits, and it's great that they've got a really nice one here. It's very stepped up a bit from those early ones. Much sharper detail. Quite simple, it's only got 3 components, so you got your 2 arms. So you're going to line up the arms with the cockpit. And then here we go, the flaps. Okay, so they've got these preset tabs. You can see how these are on the lower angle. Okay, so these are the flaps dropped, and they're the flats. The flaps level. Got the ailerons there. Again, they've got some really nice sharp detail, deep detail. There's a standard prop there. And I will show you the other prop. They do include the K-type prop. Closed main undercarriage. That's a nice touch too, because if you were to try to put all these together in separate components, quite often you get these massive gaps. That alleviates that, because with gear up, the aircraft should be looking as aerodynamic as possible. Here you got the wing root. Okay, so that looks like it's part of the undercarriage as well. And again, the main undercarriage box. Okay, so that's one of the walls that'll be fit across here. Okay, and there's a prop. Okay, so the standard props were quite recognizable with this strengthening fillet on the base there and the rounded tips. Okay, so what I might do is let's just zoom that out again. And I'll bring in the final piece, which is the K-type prop. So you notice that it is a bit more, well, I guess, profiled, I guess you call it. Let's see if I can get this. Oops. We'll do this, see if this works. How's that? Sort of see the profile difference? See down towards here compared to this. Okay, so you got both as well. So you've got your choices of whichever propeller you choose to put on. Either one will be right. Okay, and that is all of the plastic components. So let's put those all over here. Now from there we have a very nice set of decals. Okay, so there's the decals with protective sheet. Let's just zoom in on this. Okay, so there's a variety of markings here. These are all British markings, as you can see, with the roundels. Have the yellow outline ones as well. And dually blue looks quite nice. You got the decals are super fine, as in they're very thin. They are a gloss finish. So in a way, gloss finish is perhaps easier to work with because you can see how they're sitting on the surface. Matte ones, when you put them on, if you've got silvering, it's very hard to see unless you hold it at a particular angle. I guess gloss is also, I don't know, I think like a gloss would give you a sharper, that's just my impression, a sharper finish. Okay, the white, which is printed, is quite nice and sharp, as well as looking quite opaque. And quite often you can get really thin decals, but if the pigment is really thin, then it will show through the base color. And then across the top, we have all the super fine stenciling, which is included. Some may think this is a real pain, but they're not that hard to put on. It is time consuming, but once they're on, they really add to the overall detail. And since this particular kit has a lot of detail added to it, a lot of parts and a lot of customization, that's just going to improve it even more. Okay, so there are all the decals. Now let's have a look at the instruction manual, which I have here. Okay, so we've got a few different languages there, a little bit of information about the actual aircraft. And then here we go here, open it up. All right, we've got a legend of what all the symbols mean. So that just helps you follow along and know what you're doing as you go step by step. Starts off with building up the cockpit. You've got the seat going together. And then this is that sub-assembly, or I guess module that I called it before, which sits in the middle of the aircraft and gives all the strength. So you've got your tail wheel that sits in here, avionics in here, and then you've got your main cockpit. So we've got the avionics going in place, seats going in, the control stick, got instruments, and then that instrument cluster is dropped into place. From there we've got the cooling. So this is that base, really recognizable part on the bottom of the fuselage. Got the radiators both sides, quite a number of components, and then it fits onto that module as well. And then we've got the walls going in place for the tail wheel. And you see the option here, either we've got the undercarriage down or undercarriage up. So if you've got the undercarriage up, it means that the doors are already molded in the open position. You just need to trim them off. Okay, from there we've got the undercarriage being mounted into that module, and then you've got the other side wall. And again, if you don't want that undercarriage extended, you just need to cut the door off. Okay, over here we're doing the side walls of the cockpit. We've got a bit of plumbing there, and then we've got the tail, I guess, what do you call it? The roots of the tails going in. So this particular part, usually you'll have that all molded in one. So obviously these particular parts are optional on different models. So with this particular one, you just need to glue it in place. And it's important that you make sure it's totally flat, because when you've got multiple parts, if you glue it off on an angle, then you're going to have issues putting it all together. Okay, so we've got the vent going in the side. So we saw there were a couple of different vents. For this version, it's the D14 one. Do exactly the same for the opposite side of the fuselage. And then you'll see here how that huge sort of structure gets put into the center of the fuselage, and it covers quite a large area. So once you've sandwiched it all together, it's going to be really robust. And from there, we've got the top of the engine cowling going in. Here's that large section which has got all the detail for the main undercarriage, and that's glued into the base of the wing. So that's going to add quite a lot of strength there as well. And that's basically going to act like the struts. So that's a one-piece wing. You've got the halves, they're glued into place, and then the machine guns. Here's the navigation lights, the clear part going in. Now at this point here where you have the wing, you need to decide what ordnance you're going to fit, because it's got markings for where your ordnance is going to go for all the struts. But if you wanted it all clean, then you don't drill out any of the holes. But if you do want some of these ordnance, you need to decide which holes to open up, because once you close it all up, the other side is going to look perfectly smooth and you won't know where to do it, and you have to carefully measure. So just pay attention to that. All right, so machine gun's going in place there. And then we've got the flaps. So the flaps here, you've got your option of flaps up or flaps down. And then we've got the ailerons as well. So ailerons can be glued in a variety of angles, and it gives the indication that it'll be safe to do 15 degrees up or down to set up your ailerons. Okay, and then you've got your wing subassembly, which is then in turn attached to your fuselage subassembly. So it just needs to be hooked into that air intake, and then it's fit down on the front end there. So press down here, and then we have that front section which seals it all off, becomes the bottom part of the engine cowl. Prop assembly here, this is designed so that your center shaft is not glued, so the propeller can still spin. That's glued in the front. You've got your exhaust stacks. Here there's a little bit of the finer detail going into the base here. You've got the vents for the air intake, frontal and rear. The bottom chin of the engine cowl. At this point you've got the rear flap for the cooling, so they can either be set in up or lower position. We've got the horizontal stabilizers. They're glued into place, and then you have your elevators, and they can be set at different angles as well. So up to 30 degrees or down up to 20 degrees. And then the rudder, and that also has 30 degree either way option. And this is a point where if you want to have all the undercarriage up, that's that optional fully sealed undercarriage doors for the main gear, and then also for the tail gear. Okay, so before you need to trim off all those open doors, and then there's a new piece to cap it all off. Okay, if you choose to have open gear, then there's quite a lot to do. There's your main doors, you got the struts, you got the wheels. Over here they're using the diamond tread pattern ones. And then they're all glued into place. You got your tail wheel that's glued into its strut. And then you've got the construction of the ordnance. So depending on which ones you wanted, you'll need to check this beforehand just to make sure you had this all ready and you had the correct holes opened up on your wings. From there we've got the prop. So you've got your spinner. That's all being finalized here. And then we have the cockpit sections. So you got your front glass, bubble canopy, pilot, and then you have your choices of either open canopy or closed canopy. And then that's all glued into place, and that's pretty much the end of the construction. From there you can choose which particular scheme you want to do it in. So there's the Dooley Bird. Okay, so that's late 45, based in England. This one here is Royal Australian Air Force in Italy, 1945. And then this is the decal instructions. Okay, so you can imagine I showed you so many of the different stencils. So this is just for stencils, and just around the prop itself, you've got all the different stencils there. So quite detailed. All right, so there we go. So that's all of the bits and pieces, and that is the Airfix 1/48 scale P51DK British, and as I've discovered, Australian P51 Mustang. So that's by Airfix. It's quite a nice kit, and as you can see there's a lot of detail involved and really nice surface detail. So a little bit different with the really deep panel lines and rivets, but I think that helps you add the detail with the washers. Collects it all very well. So give that a go, very nice.